Hey people, welcome to another distance learning lesson. Today we're going to focus on ecological and social footprint from Unit 4. So first we're going to look at global emissions. There are many sources of environmental pollution that are warming the earth, causing this greenhouse gas effect that we've got. And the two key greenhouse gases, although there are more, are carbon dioxide and methane. And it's our activity, it's human activity on the planet that is creating more and more of these gases, which are in turn warming our planet. And we're going to look at that in a little bit more detail. So you can see here, this is the greenhouse effect. You can see that the sun's rays are coming down and not bouncing off our ozone layer, our atmosphere, which is what they would tend to do. Instead, they are coming down through our atmosphere and then bouncing around within our atmosphere and then warming our planet as a result. So the depletion of this ozone layer around the outside here is being caused by the increase in CO2 and methane and our other greenhouse gases. How does nature go to help this? So we look at nature for the answer at the moment, and it scrubs the carbon from our atmosphere. So the key of having all the trees and greenery, it is removing continuously, filtering our atmosphere. And obviously we need more of this, but we are at the moment at a tipping point where we are producing more carbon dioxide than our trees and our plants can actually handle. And as a result, this is why greenhouse gases, and we're starting to see unusual weather conditions appearing more and more frequently because of the increase in our greenhouse gas emissions. And this is linked to something called the carbon footprint. So this is the amount of carbon dioxide. The carbon footprint is about the amount of carbon dioxide that's released into the atmosphere as a result of the actions of maybe an individual like myself, or an organisation, or a community, or a school, or whatever it may be. So as an individual this morning, I've driven into work and I've used a car. This car is a diesel, which has produced a lot of CO2 driving me to, and eventually will drive me from work. I've probably boiled the kettle this morning to make a cup of tea, which has used electricity that would have been created through some sort of power plant, which will have produced carbon dioxide. So every little action that I've taken today will have increased or added to my carbon footprint. Think about your carbon footprints. Think about what you've done this morning. Have you increased or the amount of CO2 being used? Have you turned your computers on this morning? Have you switched on your PlayStations? Have you been in a ride in the car? Have you been dropped off at school? Whatever the process you've been through this morning, think about what your carbon footprint has been. Or maybe over the last few days, how has your carbon footprint been? Is it increasing? We're living in what we call a consumer society. And what do we understand by this term? Well, this is the idea of continually buying new goods, buying and selling new goods all the time. Taking something, rather than repairing it, we are throwing away. We are disusing. We're not bothered about this product anymore. The mobile phone is probably a perfect example of this product, this idea of a consumer society. We all would like the latest technology, the latest iPad, the latest mobile phone. And what happens to the other ones? Well, either they get recycled or reused in some way, or they get thrown away. This is having quite a large impact on the carbon footprint. So we are wasting materials, we are continually wanting something new, someone has got to manufacture these, and obviously if they're manufacturing these new products, they're going to be producing carbon dioxide. So carbon footprints of products, we have to kind of look at in a way that every product has some stage in its life an impact. And we can measure this, and we can have a look here at this PET bottle, polyethylene terephthalate bottle here, that looks like a little bit like a Coke bottle, I suppose. You can see how 36% energy at this stage here, and this is just retail vending, refrigeration. We haven't taken into account yet the manufacture of the material or the product itself. That's just refrigeration at vending. So sitting in a shop, being kept cool, 36% of its CO2 produced. The packaging and raw materials used to make that bottle, 34%. The ingredients and actual that side, 9%. Processing and manufacture, 11%. Distribution, this product is potentially sold worldwide. Think about Coca-Cola. Think about the carbon footprint of that product and where it comes from and its distribution globally. Many other products suffer from this global distribution issue as well. And then the disposal at the very end there, you can see only 2% of the disposal, so this is in the recycling stage. So how can this affect the choices of you buying something? How can the carbon footprint that you are aware of, how can that be reduced? So maybe we're looking for products that perhaps are more locally sourced, so they would have a reduced carbon footprint. We look at mining. What kind of materials come from mines? Well, these are going to be all our ores. These are going to be all our metals that we get from ores. So like bauxite ore gives us aluminium, and iron ore gives us iron and steel and so on. These all come from the ground. So we're using explosives to mine this from the ground, which is we're going to be using heavy machinery. We're going to be using big refining processes, and all of these are going to have negative impacts. Why? Well, because they're going to be reducing carbon dioxide. Huge negative impacts, and we're also going to be damaging something else alongside this. These mines are somewhere. These mines are underground. These are going to be damaging local environments. They're going to be displacing wildlife. Deforestation obviously is having a large impact. So this is where large areas of forest and rainforest are destroyed to harvest wood and make farmlands. How is this, interesting question there, is how is this affecting biodiversity? Well, we are destroying habitats. We are destroying landscapes. So if in this case, if we're doing this, then we're obviously going to be having an impact on not just creatures, but also ourselves. Well, as I said at the start of this, CO2 scrubbing happens through trees and the removal of CO2 from our atmosphere. If we are removing trees from our planet, then we're going to have an impact on deforestation and the amount of CO2 that's there. Farming. It's estimated that 15% of greenhouse gas emissions are generated during farming. So this is through things like chemicals that they spray onto crops to increase yield, so to increase the amount of product and that they are producing. As the population grows, the demand for this food is ever increasing, so they want to get more and more of a yield. We've also got to look at the increase in meat. And if we increase the amount of meat that we're eating, we then end up with more waste products being produced from cows and sheep and other farm animals, which in turn produces a great amount of CO2. Where does all that go? So a lot of negative effects can come, not just from, but can come from the farming industry as well. Farming is used to grow crops, which are used for biofuels, so carbon neutral based fuels, such as oilseed rape. Product miles. When we're looking at product miles, this refers to the distance a product has travelled from its beginning source, from its raw material, whether it's dug out the ground or grown, to its final disposal. So this is the whole cycle. So we look at this in terms of the life cycle assessment back in Unit 1, where we look at it's been extracted from the ground, it's then been taken through some sort of processing process, it's then been distributed, it's then been used, and then at the end of its life, it's getting recycled. Well, this whole idea of product miles, you can analyse any product that you have sitting around you. Have a little think about maybe the desk that you're sitting at. Well, where's the wood from? So the wood is maybe, if it's a pine material, it's come from a Scandinavian country. Look at it and think about the hinges. Well, maybe the hinges were made in Italy. All these parts are then maybe assembled in the UK. So think about all the miles that one product that you're perhaps sitting at has had to travel to get to your place. You've had to go and pick this up, or your parents have had to go and pick this up from a shop. Again, probably driving a car, or it's had to be delivered to you through a lorry. At some stage in its life, it's going to have to be disposed of. So again, it's going to have to be transported somewhere. All of these individual movements add up to something called product miles. And those product miles have a big impact on our environment. Atmospheric pollution. So this is from emissions such as our cars. We're having a detrimental effect on our air quality. You only look at countries like China, where they end up wearing masks, not just because of a viral infection, but because there is atmospheric pollution. There's a smog that surrounds them, what they're breathing in, day out. And these emissions are a massive battle for countries like China. They have to figure out now how we're going to get away from these. And we are recognizing now that the archaic sort of engines of petrol and diesel are on the way out, and new electric cars are coming in, which will eventually have a huge impact on the health of people in these major cities. Social responsibility is all about our own individual responsibilities, our lifestyles, to make sure that we reduce the environmental impact or what we have on our environment. So maybe I could have made the decision this morning to get the bike out the shed and pedal on into school. Okay, could have tried that. Maybe I could, rather than switching my laptop on and my iPad on and have my phone, maybe just get away with just using one of those devices today. Or maybe I don't leave my PlayStation on standby all night, so I'm not using that extra energy. So we all have social responsibilities. Think about the products that you're buying. Think about the type of products. Think about, well, can I make my phone last another year or even 2 years, rather than going out and buying that nice new shiny one because it's got a slightly better camera for doing selfies on. The social footprint. This measures how far a company's policies will affect its stakeholders and the company, as well as the wider society. So it's not just us as individuals that have a big impact on the environment, it's companies. So how do they accept their social responsibility? Are they looking at reducing the amount of packaging in their products? Are they thinking about what kind of materials they're doing, and can they reduce the materials or maybe even replace certain materials so they haven't got to go and create a new mine to dig out ores? Or maybe they could go for a more sustainable option when they're producing a wooden desk, rather than using resources that are going to eat up and take away the amount of CO2 that we have in our environment. This is also being governed by our governments. Governments have a responsibility to protect the environment and make sure that the safe working conditions exist for all of us. And by doing this, they are putting legislation in and safe working conditions to make sure that we are safe and healthy. So they set out many different rules in particular for working environments and minimum condition for employees. So we have the Health and Safety Executive, which we've talked about before, where they have a legal obligation to provide safe working environments. So this may be to do with things like PPE, which you can see here, but also good extraction, making sure that the employee's health is not compromised by whatever product or material is being produced in their factories. So there's talk of the government protecting us, and this links into recent legislation such as the Tokyo Protocol, which is an international commitment to reduce greenhouse gas emissions signed by 192 of the 196 countries on the planet. So they recognise now that greenhouse gases are a huge threat to our planet. And this threat to our planet isn't just going to go away. We have to do something to enable us to carry on nurturing and looking after our planet. We have the Paris Agreement as well, which was adopted by 195 of these countries in 2016. This is the world's first climate change agreement. And the idea behind this agreement was to limit the increase of a global temperature, average temperature, to below 2 degrees. Reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and then give financial support to low emissions development. So this is where we're now starting to see no new cars, no new sort of diesel and petrol-based cars being produced from the year 2040 in the UK, and a increase in hybrids and electrical vehicles because they're trying to reduce this right down. There'll be legislation that's going out to companies to ensure that they are reducing the amount of CO2 that they're producing. So there's a lot of work going on, perhaps not quite enough at the moment, but there has to be more, and we will get there eventually with this.